Rob, do we have any other questions right now before we move into? Okay.
We do, as a matter of fact. Osborne had every coach in the state developing kids to fit the program for several decades. Do you see that same thing starting to cascade through the state with Scott Frost at head coach? That's what Brad Richards is asking.
I would say that I don't know if he had every coach in the state developing the kids for the program. It's one of those things that what the college team does, and you'll find this pretty much everywhere. What the college team does trickles down to what the high school level is doing, and that's pretty much in every state. If the major college team is running the spread, most high school teams in the state are going to start running the spread. If they're running the option, most high school teams in the state are going to start running the option. So the one thing I think that was happening a little bit before Scott is that the game changed so much into a vertical threat and more of a passing game. I would say now that I see the trend being the same, like what they're trying to do down in Lincoln. But at the same time, the game's evolved, and it was evolving already before Scott got here.
Mhm.
So I think that now we're seeing, what looks like football everywhere. You're having guys that are wanting to throw the ball all around the field, and the run game is still, a part of the game, but it's not the part of the game now. Now where you got receivers and tight ends that are doing amazing things on the outside, and quarterbacks that can throw the ball all over the field. So the one thing I wish that would catch up is defense. I wish defense would catch up. Now you see every kid now wants to play receiver, but somebody's got to guard those guys. So I wish more kids would take a defensive mindset and want to play defensive back or play outside linebacker or rush the passer. The lineman is still always kind of going to be the same. Big guys are big guys, but as far as like the skill position goes, I wish the defensive players in this state particularly, I wish more people would focus on the defensive side of the ball, because there's a lot of opportunity for kids to play defensive back right now, and it's not being taken advantage of in our state by our high school athletes.
It's interesting that you say that too, because I just sent my son to a football camp a couple weeks ago, and he wants to be a wide receiver. But at the camp, if you signed up as a wide receiver, you also had to learn the defensive back. So they had you matching up. So, I mean, there was a lot of one-on-one drills going on, and you had to learn. And they weren't just saying, okay, line up against this guy. They were teaching him, like, okay, if he goes outside, you use your right hand. If you go inside, you use your left hand, like forcing guys off of their route, things like that, like everything, like forcing them out of bounds on their route. So they were teaching them both sides of the ball on that and how to counter it on site. So that, I mean, it'd be nice. You're right. If they could just teach that anyway, because you never know which side they're going to really excel at, no matter what they want to be doing. So
no, there's only one football on the field. There's 4 or 5 receivers, out there at a time sometimes. So somebody's got to guard those guys, and there's scholarship money and NIL money for defensive backs too. So it's we see it all the time with our 7-on-7 program. When we have tryouts, we have 90 receivers and 20 defensive backs.
Yeah, it's funny.
outrageous.
Oh, sorry. I'm kind of breaking up here, so I
No, that's okay.
apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. But yeah, it's kind of funny because I told my son too. I said, well, you should get used to playing defensive back, because the fact of the matter is that 99% of the quarterbacks out there are not Peyton Manning. So chances are you'll be catching more passes from them than you would your own quarterback anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hopefully that catches up, but the trend is the same everywhere. Like I took my son, he's a 7th grader, so we took him to a camp in Chicago just to give him, some exposure of what it looks like outside of the state of Nebraska competition wise. And it was the same thing there. Like the camp was a national camp that traveled the country, but they didn't figure it out any better than anybody else has. Again, there was 40 receivers and 18 defensive backs. But there was a lot of guys in that receiver group that were really defensive backs, but they want to be receivers. And that's going to hurt kids, in the long run, unless you're lucky enough to have a college coach or a recruiter to be able to see what you can be. Kids stick themselves on one side of the ball, and they'll cut off their opportunities to play at the next level because they're not being seen at what their skill set really is probably better suited for. So that's the one thing I wish. We can't do anything about anywhere else, but that's the one thing here that we're trying to, encourage more kids to play defense, because there's a lot of opportunity for defensive players out there right now. And there's coaches, we talk to coaches all the time that are looking for defensive backs that are 6'1" and 6'2" to help, guard these big rangy receivers out there now. And there's kids that can do it, but they just have to take the mindset of, I want to be a defensive player.
That's interesting. I mean, that almost takes me back to like the early 80s, how they used to recruit. I can remember McBride talking about like we would recruit 6 running backs, and the 3 that couldn't make it, they would just move them to defense. But it wasn't like guys weren't getting recruited defensively first. They were getting recruited for, the offensive skill. And then, but the idea, and then that started switching kind of in the 90s, is that you get some real deal, defensive guys. And you think about those Miami and those Florida State defenses, and that's what we started building ours around. And that's, where we started recruiting guys like you and getting, oh my gosh, I mean, the amount of all conference and all American defensive players that we had, great talent and great skill. I coached for about 18 years youth football in Lincoln, which was like 5th through 8th grade. They didn't have junior high football in Lincoln. And so I would go to those coaches clinics every spring from the last year of Solich all the way to the second year of Frost right before COVID. And then that's the last one I went to. But those spring ones, you asked Rob about, did we, or actually the viewer was asking about, do the schools copy what Nebraska ran? And I think in some ways they kind of used to when it was very consistent, when it was Osborne and even Solich. But man, once it got to Callahan, and then the offenses switched, and then you bring in Bo, and then you go to Riley. And by that time, I mean, everyone's kind of running their own thing. And it's a lot more, Nebraska high school football now, what you see offensively is so wide, spread now anymore. I mean, it used to be when I was playing, and I say playing as I went to Columbus Scotus, and I was not a starter. We'll just put it that way. But back in my day, I mean, you might have one team on the schedule that throws the ball. We ran a 6-2, and we had 3 defenses: outside, middle, inside. That was about it. And we won a state championship doing that, right? The amount of offenses that are out there now, and the amount of the different styles. I mean, it's really impressive. It's totally changed the game.